Hello everyone, welcome to the Brain Teasers Institute. If you are preparing for your IGCSE Economics exam, then you're in the right place. Today, we are diving into the October-November 2024 Variant 12 MCQ paper. I, Khushbu Gajra, will be breaking down the questions step by step for you so that you can understand how to approach complicated questions and maximize your marks. So grab your notes and follow along. If you find this video helpful, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so that you never miss an exam tip. Alright, let's jump to the first question. Which economic question is least likely to arise as a result of scarcity? Now, we already know that what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce are the most important economic question that any economy has to answer. Now, here we have an odd man out, which is option D. When will we produce? Now, that is not in question, any economic question. So, this is the least likely. The question is least likely, so I mark D. What is opportunity cost? The allocation. Now we know that opportunity cost is the next best alternative for gone. Now, most of the questions that you will realize, which are what is meant by this, you will get the answers in the definition itself. If you're thorough with your definitions and textbooks, then this should not be very difficult. Straight away, we will mark D here because that's the option, the next best alternative for gone when making economic decisions. Although, if you think that you want to be 100% sure, I suggest that you read all the options once and then mark the correct answer. The allocation of resources in an economy, no. The cost to the individual when they consume a good, no. Lack of goods and services available to satisfy human wants, that is scarcity and not opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost is equal to the next best alternative foregone when making an economic decisions. So D becomes the answer. Then next question is regarding the production possibility curve. The diagram shows the production possibility curve for an economy that produces two goods, X and Y. Which point shows the greatest opportunity cost of producing one more unit of X? So they are saying if we want to produce one more unit of X, then which point is going to give us the greatest opportunity cost? Which means they're basically asking us out of these 3 points, which is going to show the highest opportunity cost when producing one more extra unit of X. Now, this question you will be wondering how to go about doing it. See, it's very simple. Now, whenever you don't know how to approach this question, the best way, and there are no numericals given, just look at this. You can always draw some graphs, the points, so that you exactly understand what is happening here. Now, look at this. I want to show you something, right? Now, see, point D does not have any opportunity cost here for producing extra unit of X because the economy is not utilizing all the factors of production in the most efficient manner. They're underutilizing. So anyways, if from point D, you're moving to A, B, C, or towards any point on the PPC, you're only going to be reaching the most efficient point. So D is not an answer. That leaves us to point A, B, or C. Now, A cannot be the answer because if you're talking about the opportunity cost, you will be moving your resources from certain resources from goods Y to goods X, right? So you will be starting either from point A to B or from point B to C, right? Now just look at this. When you are moving from point A to B, look at the cost that you're incurring. This is the area of the cost. And you're able to look at the area of how much extra you're able to produce goods X. It is greater, right? But look at this space. When you're moving from point B to C, look at this. This is a greater area of opportunity cost while the production is much lesser. So point C becomes the highest, greatest opportunity cost point where the opportunity cost of producing one extra unit of X is the greatest. So C will be the answer here. A period of bad weather led to a failure of the rice crop. Now I clearly can understand as soon as I read the question that okay, a failure of a rice crop, which means there's going to be any impact on the supply. Now impact on supply is going to be reduced. Let's talk about this. What is the effect on the market for rice? We know that whenever the crop fails, there is not going to be surplus, right? There is always going to be shortage. So point C and point D are out of question. Then where do we move on to? There is going to be shortage of rice. Obviously, when there is a shortage of rice, rice being a necessity commodity, the prices for it are going to rise. So here, look at point B. Here A, the shortage of rice and fall in prices, no. shortage of rice and rise in prices. So B becomes the answer straight away. Next question. The diagram shows a change in the demand for coffee. Now, demand curve is moving from, let's understand where. What would cause the demand for coffee to change from point D1 to D2? Let's look at this. It is moving rightward, which means there is an increase in demand. Now, whenever there's increase in demand, always remember that there is non-price factor. Any other factor other than the non-price factor is going to affect the demand for the coffee, right? So price is not going to be the variable. Now let's look at the option, a good coffee harvest. Now that is going to have an impact on the supply, not on the demand curve. So A is not an option. A rise in the price of a substitute drinks. Now yes, if we are talking about any substitute drinks to coffee, if their price rise, then the substitute demand is going to increase. So B is a probable answer. A rise in the wages of the coffee workers. Now this is again an impact on the supply, nothing to do with demand. So C is not an option. A successful advertising campaign for tea. Now advertising successful campaign for tea has nothing to do with coffee, right? So D is also not an option. Straight away you can mark B as the answer. Next, moving on to sixth question. The table shows the supply for a product at different prices. We don't have to look at the table directly. Always save time when you're attempting MCQ paper by first reading what is required and then looking at such a big data. Where always remember, we have noticed in the past, whenever they are giving any question paper of MCQs, mostly in the first 5 to 14 questions, there'll be one or two. I call them a time waste question. Specifically, why? Because they will lead to a lot of calculations, or they will ask you to read through a lot of text and derive some conclusions, which is absolutely wasting 5 to 6 minutes of your time, precious time during your examination. So try to identify such kind of questions and then leave them at the end, come back to it later in point of time and solve them. Because what will happen if you end up wasting a lot of your time in the initial questions, then at the end you will not have sufficient time to solve the remaining part of the questions, and then you will panic and eventually lose marks. Why? Because there'll be inaccuracies in your answers for those questions. So let's not do that. Identify such questions, leave them at the end. But right now, I'll show you exactly how to approach this question. Now, there is a price change from 12 to 14. This is what they are saying. What will be the change in the supply? Now, remember, straight away, you can understand that price is a factor that is affecting supply, right? Whenever the price is affecting supply, the words will be used is extension or contraction. Now, what I mean by this is, if you would have been thorough with your textbook or your coursework, you would realize that whenever we speak about price affecting supply, the words that we use is there is rise in supply, fall in supply, or extension or contraction. Whenever there are any other factors other than the price factors affecting supply, then there is increase in supply or decrease in supply. The terminologies used are different. So be very sure of this, right? Now here, since the price is affecting supply, there is definitely going to be extension or contraction. Now I know since the price is increasing, the suppliers will be more than willing to supply more. So there cannot be a contraction. There's always going to be an extension. So supply will contract, supply will contract. A and B are not the answers. Supply will extend by 40 units and there will be a movement along the supply curve. Supply will extend by 200 units and there will be an outward shift of the supply curve. Now, remember the supply, initial supply was 160 and the new supply is 200. So there is an extension. There is an extension in supply by 40 units. So this is the direct answer. Even if you don't understand that, what if they would have given you this as 40 as well? Then how would you understand which option to select? Remember, whenever the price is affecting supply curve, there is a movement along the same supply curve. There is no new supply curve created. All right, so don't get confused. I'm also reiterating on certain concepts here because a lot of time students have some questions that why it is not option D and why it is option C. So let's look at this. So C becomes the option straight away because there's a movement. This option is correct. Supply will extend by 40 units and there will be a movement along the supply curve. There will not be any outward shift of the supply curve. So please make sure that you know about this concept. Which changes would move the equilibrium in the diagram from point X to point Z? Now, clearly I can see that, this point is here somewhere, right? This is my original. I need my demand curve to also shift here and my supply curve to shift here, right? Look at this. So I need an increase in demand from D to D1 and decrease in supply S to S2, right? So I have to look at it. Increase in demand, this is A and B are out of question because they're talking about decrease in demand. Let's look at C. An increase in demand and decrease in supply. Yes, this is what we are looking at. So option C. But let's look at the next option as well. An increase in demand and increase in supply. No, if we are speaking about increase in supply, then there is a rightward shift of the supply curve. This is not where we will get the new equilibrium as Z. So C is the answer here. Next question. Eighth one. When the price of the shirt rises from $8 to $10, the demand for the shirt falls from 1,000 to 500. What is the value of price elasticity of demand for shirts? Now, for this, a lot of students they are unable to attempt this question because they do not recommend or they have not memorized the equation or the formula for PED. The formula for PED is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded upon the percentage change in price. Now percentage change can be found like this. PED is equal to new quantity. So new quantity is 500 units minus 1000 upon 1000 into 100. This is the numerator, divided by new price is 10 minus 8 upon 8 into 100. So basically, how do you find the percentage change? It is always new minus the old upon old into 100. Please make sure to remember this formula. This is used almost everywhere, wherever they're asking you to calculate the percentage change of anything. This formula can be used across subjects, all right, for analysis, evaluation, anything that you like. So please memorize this. It will make your life easier. This is a very uncomplicated question, yet without the formula, you will fail to attempt this. So the numerator, when we calculate this, will come to 50%, whereas the denominator will come to around 25%. So your PED is 2, which is greater than 1. So A becomes the answer. Ninth question, a government intends to build a new international airport in an area of the outstanding natural beauty. What would be the external cost? They're asking for not the private cost, they're asking for the external cost of this decision. So maybe a pollution. So directly, your thought process should start. There's going to be pollution, there's going to be, the land could be used for farming or something, and they might not be able to do this anymore. So this could be the external cost. Let's look at the options. The cost of importing construction material is not an external cost. The enjoyment lost by those unable to use the countryside. Now, this is an external cost, right? Because a lot of people travel to the countryside over the weekends. Why? Because they want to relax. Now, that enjoyment will be gone because they are building a new international airport there. Let's look at the next option also. The increase in profits for the local businesses. No, this is a private benefit. Or the external benefit that we from whose perspective we are looking at. Remember, the profits are generated. This is a positive thing. It's not an external cost. The wages paid to construction worker are only increasing the income, so it's not an external cost. So straight away B becomes the answer. Next one, what is an important role of the central bank? Now, central bank, we know that there are only two roles. Number one, controlling the money supply in the economy, and the price stability in the economy, right? So look at this. We'll read all the options. Attempts to achieve price stability, A is the answer. But let's look at this. Issue credit cards, provide loans to producers, provide savings account for consumers. Now, all these are the roles or functions of the commercial bank, and not the central bank, which is why A becomes the answer. 11th question, how would a change in the demand for labor affect the labor market in any occupation? Now look at this question again, something which is asking you to, evaluate a lot of things. Now this is, when you don't know what to do, always remember the quickest and the most safest way to do any of these questions is to draw the diagram or the graph in rough and try to attempt them. So let's look at this change in demand for labor. Now, change in demand, I know that the demand for labor is increasing or decreasing. So what am I going to do is I'm going to create two graphs here. One, demand, the original demand curve for labor and supply curve for labor, original demand and supply curve for labor. Now, what am I supposed to do is first I'll create a scenario where the demand for labor is rising, increasing. So there's a rightward shift from D to D1. And the second scenario is when the supply for labor is decreasing. So there is, oh, sorry, it's not the supply, my bad. The demand is decreasing. So both are demand. So demand is taking a leftward shift from D to D dash. If you don't remember the question, please read the headings and everything properly. Otherwise, there could be an oversight mistake that can definitely occur. Now, when there is an increase in demand, what happens is we can see that the equilibrium wages are rising. When there is a decrease in demand, the equilibrium wages are declining. However, change in the quantity of labor supplied, here the labor supply is extending. See, because the price or the wages level are determining the supply of labor, so there's a movement along the supply curve, right? And here they are contracting, here they are extending. So here the wages are rising when the demand is increasing. So we have to look at the combinations. When there is demand for labor is decreasing, the equilibrium wage is decreasing. Yes, this is the scenario. But look at this. The labor supplied is extending. No, it is contracting. So A is not an option. Decrease in labor demand, yes. Is resulting in an increase in the wages? No. Straight away cancel out. Increase in demand for labor, yes. Decrease in the equilibrium wage, no. Straight away now you can mark, you don't even have to check because you have already done the due diligence that was needed, right? Now let's look at this, the next question. Still, if I'll just let you know, see, there is an increase in demand, there is increase in wage, and then there is an extension in the supply, labor supply. Correct? Now, let's move on to the next question. 12th one. A fast food multinational bought a food ordering website in order to allow the multinational customers to download menus and make advance payment. Which term best describes this merger? Now, a lot of students get confused between this, but if you know that there are four sectors in any economy, the first sector is primary, second, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Okay, quaternary sector is something to do with the IT sector, IT and communications, etc. Now, here we know that the fast food multinational, fast food is already at this level, fast food chain. They have overtaken a food ordering website. Now, website, e commerce, everything falls under the quaternary sector, e com, right? So, there is a vertical forward integration. So it is vertical forward. C is the answer. Moving on to the next one. The diagram shows the average cost for the firm in the long run. Now, whenever you see what would cause the shift from ATC1 to ATC2, look at this. Obviously, the prices, the average total cost is declining over the period of time when the output is also increasing. Now, we can understand this whenever the average total cost is shifting, the curve is shifting, it is always result of an external economies of scale. The internal economies of scale will result in the average cost declining on the same average total cost curve, but there will not be any new curve formed. So here let's look at this. I can clearly see option B. See, difficulties in controlling firm, managerial economies of scale, and technical economies of scale. All these three factors are internal economies of scale that the business can enjoy. But external economies of scale is the option B. Straight away, I'm marking that. 14th question. What is most likely to encourage capital intensive production methods? They are saying capital intensive means machinery used in a low income country. Usually, we all know whenever there is a low income country, mostly the labor force is unemployed. So, ideally, most of them would prefer using a labor intensive method of production. However, this economy is using capital intensive. Let's look at the option. Expensive capital equipment cost would not encourage them to do this. Obviously, because the economy is low income, the government might also be having lesser tax revenue collected, so they might not be able to spend so much of amount on the expensive capital equipment. Grants from foreign aid programs. Now, this could be a probable answer. Why? Because whenever they get government, the foreign aids from the World Bank or the IMF or any other organization for the developmental program, then they would use that to invest in the capital intensive production methods. So this is a probable answer. Supplies of local low cost labor. Now, this will not encourage, if there is already a low cost labor available, is not going to encourage them to use a capital intensive method of production. So, C is not an answer. A shortage of a highly trained supervisor again will not encourage them to invest in capital intensive because they don't have people to, run the machineries in the factories, etc. So, the only factor that can encourage them to do something like this is grants from foreign aid. So, B becomes the answer. Next question. A firm's average revenue is $20. It sells 1,000 units. They are asking us what is the total revenue and price for the product. Clearly, 1,000 into $20 will give me 20,000 as the total revenue. So option A and B is out of question. This divided by the total number of units will give me $20 as a price. So C becomes the answer. Next question. A competitive industry becomes a monopoly. What is most likely the advantage for consumers? Remember, the competitive industry is always advantageous, but when there is monopoly, the maximum advantage that they can get is the lower prices because of the economies of scale. But let's look at the option. A consumer choice may increase. No, because now the monopoly, the person, basically the business knows that there's only one choice or one seller in the market, so there might not be many choices given to the consumer. So A is not an advantage. Economies of scale may reduce prices. Yes, this is probably the answer. C, more goods may be produced. Yeah, but this is not an advantage to the consumer, right? Prices may be set by the market forces. No, a monopolist has the price. He's a price maker here. They have some control over the price setting of their products, right? So B is the answer where the advantages for the consumer could be there. 17, what will cause real GDP to rise in an economy? Now, real GDP to rise, and they have given everything in nominal GDP. Look at this, right? Now, if I want my real GDP to rise, first I need to understand that nominal GDP is not inflation adjusted. Right? So nominal GDP, if it is rising faster than the rate of employment, then there is no real GDP rising. Nominal GDP rising faster than inflation, yes. If nominal GDP is rising faster than inflation, then obviously our real GDP is increasing, right? So B becomes the answer here. Nominal GDP rising faster than the population. No, this has nothing to do with the output increasing because real GDP looks at the output, total output of the economy. Nominal GDP rising, it's not inflation adjusted. We don't know whether the real GDP will result in raising or not. So B is the answer. What is the money supply? Now, money supply, we all know the amount of money available within the economy. This is the total. So let's look at the option. The total quantity of foreign currency available. No, foreign currency, no. This is uh, the foreign currency has nothing to do with the money in the economy. The total quantity of money available within the economy. Yes, this is the answer. I'll read the other two options as well to make you understand. The total quantity of money issued by the central bank. Now, the central banks only and only mints money in forms of currencies, etc. However, the commercial banks, with the help of multiplier and the lending, they keep increasing the credit supply in the market, the money supply in the market, by way of issuing credit cards and loans, etc. So remember, the total quantity of money is not issued by the central bank itself. It's a combination of the commercial and the central bank. The total quantity of money within commercial banks, no. Again, because commercial banks, with the help of multiplier, are actually kind of multiplying the deposits that they have in form of loans and all, because these are just the entries in the accounts, right? So B becomes the answer. What macroeconomic policy is most likely to achieve economic growth and price stability? They want both economic growth as well as price stability. Now, if we speak about fiscal policy, you are going to increase consumer spending and reduce the taxation. Now, this will result in the money supply increasing, obviously increasing the economic growth. But here there is no price stability because people will have most money to spend, more disposable income, and so the prices are going to rise. So A is not an option. Import barriers are not going to result in anything to do with the economic growth and price stability within the economy. At times, what happens is when you impose import barriers, this may result in increase in inflation in the economy because you might be importing cheaper raw materials or cheaper equipments, etc., from abroad so as to use in the economy for production, etc. But now, since you're imposing import barriers, there might not be price stability. So B is not an option. Monetary policy, again, the government might reduce the interest rates and increase the money supply. But again, this is going to have the same impact as the fiscal policy. This is going to increase the economic growth. However, there will not be any price stability in the market. The prices of the commodities are going to rise because people have more money to spend, right? So D is the answer. Why? Because when the supply side policy is going to result in the overall output of the economy rising, as well as there is price stability because the aggregate demand is increasing in the aggregate demand is also matched with increase in supply with the help of supply side policy. So C is the answer. What is the definition of economic growth? Now, this is nothing but the total value of the nation's output, right, over the period of time of one accounting year. Now, here it is an increase in the general levels of prices over time. No, it is the increase, that is inflation, and it is an increase in the level of the nation's output over time. Yes, B is the answer. An increase in the level of total demand over time. No, it is an increase in wages, interest, profits, and rent over time. No, it is an increase in the level of nation's output over time, right? There are different definitions for the economic growth. Whatever definition is given, please make sure the interpretation remains the same. Now, what causes cyclical unemployment? Now, we know that the cyclical unemployment, here the word, now you know what happens is the most common mistake what I have realized the kids doing is they will say, oh, there's a permanent decrease in the demand for labor. Uh, and they get confused between option A and option C. Now, remember this, whenever we speak about permanent decrease in demand for a labor, we are talking about something to do with structural unemployment and not cyclical. Cyclical unemployment occurs because there is an overall decline in the aggregate demand in the economy, right? Once the aggregate demand is back and thriving, what will happen is these laborers who were laid off will be recruited back in the market, right? So it's only a temporary a decrease in the demand for the labor. It is not a permanent decrease in demand always happens when there is a structural unemployment. For instance, when the traditional cloth making mills were converted into capital intensive, what happened, those mill workers went unemployed, right? They did not know to how to operate any other kind of machinery except that mill, the old mill, ancient, what do you call the machine that they used to operate, which was in the older times, right? So they were unemployed. They were permanently, so these textile industries no longer needed them. There's a permanent decrease here. So you have to understand this part that permanent decrease is always resulting due to structural unemployment, whereas temporary decrease in demand for labor is due to the cyclical unemployment in the recession. It's only temporary and not permanent. Now, the table shows government expenditure and revenue in selected years. Again, they have given us three different scenarios. What might explain the change in the government budget over time? Now, just look at this very carefully. Here, it is 500, 500. The budget is balanced. Here, the government expenditure is 600, whereas the tax revenue is 400. So there is a budget deficit of negative 200. And here, 700 and 300, there is a budget deficit of negative 400. Correct? What might explain the changes in the government budget over the period of time? A fall in the dependency ratio. If the dependency ratio is falling, which means the income should rise. So ideally, the government might not end up spending so much and would have been able to collect higher revenues than before. So A is probably not an answer. A fall in the exchange rate has nothing to do with the government expenditure and the tax revenue. So B is out of question. An increase in the cyclical unemployment. Now, cyclical unemployment, we know that there is a lack of aggregate demand in the economy, and also people's income are lower, so they'll not be able to pay sufficient taxes to the government, while the government, in order to increase the aggregate demand, might have to increase their spending. So C is the answer. If the real GDP is rising, then the government tax revenue should also proportionately rise, but that's not happening, so D is also not an option. So straight away C is an answer. The next question is, the table shows changes in economic policies for four countries A, B, C, D. Which country is most likely to be following a policy of preventing deflation? Okay. Now, when you're preventing deflation, which means aggregate demand is low, so you want to increase the aggregate demand, right? So what you will do, money supply should increase, right? When you're fighting or preventing deflation, government spending should also increase, because that is also going to help in increasing the aggregate demand in the economy. And taxation actually removes the money from the economy. The government doesn't want that. Government wants people to spend more in the economy, right? So taxation should decline, the tax rate should decrease. So let's look at this combination. money supply increasing Money supply increasing and taxation decreasing is point C. So we'll mark that. Next question, 24th. Workers in Switzerland earn more on average than workers in Mexico. What is likely cause of this? Now, uh, obviously, these two countries are different in terms of economies also. But let's look at the options that are given to us. A greater percentage of workers in Switzerland work part-time than in Mexico. No, the part-time workers will not be paid very high, right? So A is not an option. Average worker in Switzerland is more productive than the average worker in Mexico. Yes, this is a probable answer why they must be earning more. The average worker in Switzerland pays more income tax than the average worker in Mexico. Now, this is a result of earning higher income. This has nothing to do why they are earning more. The unemployment rate is higher in Switzerland than in Mexico. No. If the unemployment rate is higher in Switzerland, then they might not be earning more, right? So it is contradicting. So D is not an option. So the answer for 24th question is B. Now, 25th question. Here again, they have given us some, this is like a time pass question again. Uh, the table contains details of the birth rate, death rate, and the net migration for several countries in a year. Now, what can be concluded from the table? Now, what I usually do is we can go with the options directly, or if you think that it is much better to, just find out first with the grid that what is happening here and then finding out the answer, that will waste a lot of your time, right? So let's go with the options. Only one country, Nigeria, had a decreasing population. Now, this has to be checked for each and every country. We cannot conclude this. But at least there are other options which can be eliminated. Let's look at them. The country with the lowest birth rate. Now, which is the country with the lowest birth rate? This is the country. With the lowest birth rate had the lowest death rate also. Lowest death rate is of this country. No. So B is not an option. The country with the lowest death rate is with this country, had the highest birth rate. No, the highest birth rate goes here. So again, C is not an option. So see how you can eliminate the option, and only you have to check one of the options which is actually applicable, or two of the options which are actually applicable. Now, next one, the country with the lowest natural rate of population was USA. Now, what is natural rate of population? Natural rate of population is birth rate minus the death rate. If you calculate for each one of them, then we get the data like 13 minus 7, which comes to, what do you call, 6%? 6%, because these are percentages. Then 14 minus 6 is 8%. 39 minus 12 is 27%, and 12 minus 8 is 4%. Right? Now, if you look at this, which is a country which has a lowest natural rate of increase in population, is USA. Yes, it is the country. So D is probably the answer. But look at A. Only one country, Nigeria, had a decreasing population. Now, just let's look at this. Its net migration rate is negative. But look at the population growth rate. The natural rate of population growth is 27%. Now, this statement is a little ambiguous. It is not certain. And so we can mark this out of question. But look at this. This is certainly we can conclude from the data. So let's go ahead with D as an option. Next question is 26th. What combination best describes the characteristics of high income economy? Now, obviously, if it is a high income economy, GDP per capita has to be high. So C and D are not an option. Human development index has to be high. Again, B, A and B, and percentage of labor force in the tertiary sector. We have learned this, that a general trend is that most of the population is employed in the tertiary sector. So all the three options should be high. So A becomes the answer. Then next question is, what might encourage international specialization between countries? Now, international specializations, we know that it is always the free trade that encourages specialization, because absolute advantage, comparative advantage, that theory applies here. So A becomes an answer. Then comes, a government wishes to stop dumping of a specific imported goods at a very low price. Which method of protection would be most effective? Now, let's look at this. If it devalues, apply an embargo on this good, yes, straight away they can, stop this dumping activity at once. So A could be the probable answer, but let's look at the others. Devalue the currency. If they devalue the currency, what is going to happen is the import becomes expensive, but that means that every other commodity is going to be affected. It's not the most effective method of protectionism from the dumping activity. So B is not an option. Increase in the interest rates. So increase in interest rates means that the overall aggregate demand in the economy will go down. Why? Because most of the people will prefer saving their money than consuming. So this is not the most effective way from dealing with dumping again. D option is provide subsidies to home producer of these goods. Again, if you give the subsidies to the home producers, what happens is it's not the most effective way. Why? Because you're trying to create competition between both. Now, dumping activity results in selling below the cost price of the goods manufactured, right? So even though the government is providing them subsidy, they might not be as competitive as the other country who is dumping the goods. So it's not the most effective way. A is the answer. Apply an embargo on this good and straight away restrict the entry of such goods in the economy. Next one, the 29th question. The price of the US dollar in terms of other currencies is set by the forces of demand and supply. Straight away, we know this is a floating exchange rate, is what it is followed. To what does the statement refer? An alternative method of trade protection? No. The determination of exchange rate is fixed? No. The determination of exchange rate is floating exchange rate? Yes. C, and last one is the increasing globalization of international trade. No, this is something to do with the floating exchange rate, and we have straight away marked this. Coming to the last question of this paper, the diagram shows the value of countries' exports and imports of goods over the past 5 years. All right, now they have given some data here, so you should be able to understand and gauge some idea. Just look at this. So, you can use scale, ruler, anything. I might just use this to get you to understand what is happening here. And we can just create a little bit of a data table here, right? Now, they have asked us between which 2 years did the country have an increase in value of imports and improvement in the balance of trade in the goods. Now, increase in value of imports, we can see that here, all these years, there is not here, not in the fourth year, but 1, 2, from 3 to 4 there is, but 4 to 5 there is not. So, see, this is out of question, right? Then they have said an improvement in the balance of trade. Now we don't know that, so it is always better to create a table and see. So what am I going to do is for 1, 2, 3, 4, all the four options, I'm going to put their exports. 20 is the value. Again, there is 20 is the value, 25 and 30. Imports value, I'm going to put 15, 18, 23 and 25. Now, I know that from here to here there is an increase. There is an increase in imports. There is an increase in imports. Oh, all right. Now, let's look at the balance of trade. Here, the difference between the two exports minus the imports will give me balance of trade. Now, here it is 5. From here to here it is 2. It has declined. So, this is not an option. 1 to 2 is not an option. Let's look at this. Here, the imports have increased. However, just look at the balance of trade. It has around, if we look at it, it has remained the same, right? So it has remained consistent. There is no improvement. So this is 2 to 3 is also not an option. So straight away you can mark C. Just look at this. The balance of trade increased. Improvement. There is increase in imports as well as the balance of trade. So C becomes the option. Here we end this paper, and we were able to solve this paper with most accuracy, and I hope this has helped you. I'll be coming up with many more past paper series and the tricks and the tips to solve IGCSE papers, so stay tuned. Thank you.